This video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. Today we're going to talk about the situation on the ground in Ukraine, and today we will discuss the special operation that was started by Israel against Iran. First, let's talk about Ukrainian-Russian conflict, and first we're going to talk about the most northern directions because something interesting is taking place currently in the northern Chernigiv area. Today, the Russians published another video how they managed to discover some equipment, most likely communication equipment or some radars or some electronic warfare equipment that Ukrainians use for air defense purposes or against Russian drones or to send Ukrainian drones deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. And when the Russians discovered this position, the Russians attacked this territory with the drone of type Gerань. And telling the truth, this is not the first video of this type since the beginning of June. For example, several days ago, we got another video from the same area, and this episode took place in the vicinity of the settlement Novgorod-Seversky, and here we can see almost the same story. First, the Russians managed to discover positions of Ukrainian forces with some equipment, probably for, let's say, drone purposes or air defense purposes. And first, the Russians attacked this territory with Iskander missile, and then the Russians attacked this territory with Gerань drone. So, and once again, this is also not the only video from this area. For example, a few days before the previous video, another radar and another station was discovered by the Russians, and as a result of Lancet strike, this position was destroyed by the armed force of the Russian Federation. Furthermore, since the beginning of June, the Russians in the same area destroyed several positions of Ukrainian FPV drone operators, those positions that Ukrainians were using to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. For example, this episode was published by the 1st of June of 2025. So, and we see that we got these updates almost from the same area, from the northeastern part of Ukraine. And telling the truth, since the beginning probably of this year, we haven't received anything like this along the entire line of combat contact. We haven't received anything like this, let's say, in the Odessa or in the Nikolaev region or in the Dnipro region or in the area of Donbass. The videos of this type we are receiving just from the northeastern part of Ukraine, which means that Ukrainians are using this area for something like a shield against the Russian units, Russian forces. And furthermore, the Ukrainians are using this territory to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. So, despite the fact that currently the Russians are trying to attack Ukraine in this area just in the Sumy direction, we believe and we expect that the Russians are going to launch their offensive operation in the direction of this pocket in the very near future. And obviously, this is the primary task of the Russians in the northeastern part of Ukraine. When talking about the Sumy direction, today we got very interesting update that was published by the official Telegram channel of the Group of Forces North. And today the Russians reported that the paratroopers of the Group of Forces North managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Yablunovka. So this village was secured by the Russians completely today, and based on this report, we have adjusted the territory around the settlement. So this area used to be under complete Russian control or uncontested area during the previous several days, and today we got final report that the Russians managed to take this village under complete control. Now the Russians have no barriers and have no problem to continue offensive operation further in the southwestern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over the villages by the name of Nikolaevka and Varachina. So we expect that after the fall of Yablunovka, after complete collapse of defense in this direction, the Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back from the villages of Varachina and Novomikhailivka in the southern direction. Otherwise, the Ukrainians could be caught in cauldron by the Russian units. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation along the river Oskol. And several days ago, the Russians resumed their offensive operation in this area. And during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. And first, we got report yesterday from pro-Ukrainian sources from the deep state team, and yesterday they colored this territory significantly in Russian favor. So, for example, these are the changes that were shown yesterday by pro-Ukrainian resources. As we can see, the Russians improved their position significantly to the west of the settlement of Dvorichne, and most likely the Russians are not going to stop right now. So this is the situation by the end of the 12th of June, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 13th 13th of June of 2025. Additional territories were colored as a contested area. From this perspective, we see that currently the Russians are trying to establish control over every single settlement stronghold along the line between the settlement of Doroshovka, Kutkovka, and Dovginke. So most likely, this small pocket is the primary task of the armed forces of the Russian Federation for the next stage of offensive operation that the Russians are trying currently to carry out in the direction of the city of Volchansk from the settlement and from the river of Oskol. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siever's direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got lots of very important updates, and the most important is that the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Grigorovka. Today, pro-Russian resources published a video from this area where we can see how Russians established their flag in the most western part of the settlement. Furthermore, several mappers adjusted their maps to the south of the village of Grigorovka. So I would like to remind you that 2 or 3 days ago, several resources reported that the Russians began their full-scale offensive operation in the direction of the village by the name of Serebryanka. And as a result of offensive operation, the armed force of the Russian Federation managed to enter the southeastern part of the settlement. So since the 10th of June of 2025, we haven't received anything that can confirm this. And just today, on the 13th of June of 2025, we got the first report that the Russians secured the village of Grigorovka, and most likely the Russians will continue offensive operation further. So something tells me that a turning point in the battle for the Siversk, the Russians managed to get this point, and obviously the Russians will continue their offensive operation further. Now the target is the village of Serebryanka. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Konstantinovka direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the southern part of the city of Chasov Yar. And according to several mappers, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions for additional square kilometers. By the end of the, 12th of June of 2025, the Russians controlled around 80% of the settlement of Chasov Yar, and by the morning of the 13th of June of 2025, the Russians improved their positions, and currently they control around 90% of the settlement. And now we see that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the city of Chasov Yar, and then obviously the Russians will continue their offensive further in the direction of the city of Konstantinovka with the purpose to increase the pressure on the final and the main direction in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation as well. Currently, there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Kamar, and according to several pro-Russian resources, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and currently, by the morning of the 13th of June of 2025, the Russians control around 60% of the settlement of Kamar. So which means that most likely by the end of the 13th of June, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area, and the Russians will finish the battle for this territory. Furthermore, the Russians continue their offensive operation along the river of Mokroe Yali in the direction of the settlement of Novopavlovka. And today, additional 3 lines and fortifications were taken by the Russians. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to outflank the settlement of Dachne and to cut this village from the mainland as well. The situation for the Ukrainians is very critical, and we see and we start receiving more and more videos how Ukrainians are trying to evacuate themselves from the pockets in the area of the settlement of Alexeyevka. For example, in this video we can see another attempt of the armed forces of Ukraine to escape this cauldron, but the Russians managed to discover Ukrainian positions and to attack their vehicles in the fields with FPV drones. Here we can see another video, and here we can see how Ukrainians were trying to evacuate soldiers from probably edge positions in this direction, but Ukrainian vehicle most likely with personnel was attacked by the Russian drone. So every single day we're getting more and more videos how Ukrainians are trying to escape this cauldron, and we see that Ukrainians suffer huge losses. Most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to evacuate every single soldier from this pocket. Most likely the Russians would be able to create a cauldron in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Gulay-Pole direction. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to enter the southeastern part of the settlement of Malynivka. This information during the previous night was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources from the deep state team, and this information was confirmed by neutral mappers. So by the beginning of the 13th of June, we have proofs that the Russians entered the village of Malynivka and that the Russians continued their offensive operation. But telling the truth, due to the fact that the Russians entered the village and due to the fact that this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources, we believe that Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area. And obviously, this operation, this offensive operation, in the direction of Malynivka, is a part of Russian greater offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Gulay Polya. We finished with updates, most important updates regarding the situation in Ukraine. Now let's talk about the situation between Israel and Iran. According to information we have during the previous night, Israel began their own offensive operation, their own special operation, with the purpose to not allow Iran to get nuclear weapons and nuclear technologies. According to information we have during the previous night, Israel launched significant number of missiles. Israel used significant number of aircrafts of different types with the purpose to attack energy facilities, military objects, areas of air defense systems on the territory of Iran. And telling the truth, I must say that I was shocked with first results of this attack because obviously we can say that this operation that was carried by the Israeli was pretty successful. As a result of this attack, Israel managed to destroy and to damage not just several air defense positions, not just several facilities, including nuclear facilities. Furthermore, according to information we have, as a result of this attack, Israel managed to probably get several very important people of Iran. So, according to information we have, Israel targeted at least 10 Iranian nuclear scientists during waves of attacks on Iranian territory. Several nuclear sites were damaged, and there is an intention to continue operations and strike additional nuclear facilities soon. So, by the morning of the 13th of June of 2025, we got reports that several nuclear scientists were obviously killed. We are talking about Mohammad Mahdi Tehranchi and Feradun Abbasi. Also, we are talking about this person, according to information we have, Lieutenant General Kalam Al Ali Rashid, one of the country's most elite military commanders, was hit by Israeli missiles, and several more officials, top officials of Iran, were targeted. According to information we have, Iran counterattacked the territory of Israel and sent dozens of drones in the direction of Israel. But according to information we have, most of those drones were brought down by Israeli air defense in the area of the border. Also, would like to remind you that several days ago we got very interesting report from Zelensky. If you remember, he stated that the United States of America decided to send some additional parts of missiles, air defense missiles, in quantity of 20,000 pieces to the territory of Israel. And now we understand that Israel is completely ready to repel any possible attack with drones from Iran. Most likely, Israel has at least 20,000 missiles, air defense missiles, that will allow them to bring down any quantity of Iranian drones that could be sent in the direction of this state. So, as for now, everybody in the world is waiting for the Iranian strike back, and according to information we have, most likely this is going to happen during the upcoming day. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching.